Morning, everybody. Good morning, Queensland. Well, I'm pleased to be joined today with the Treasurer, our Minister for Agriculture, Mark Ferner, of course, Major General Jake Elwood, and we're here at the property of Troy. And thank you very much, Troy, for allowing us to come here today. And we're going to talk about the impacts on agriculture, but also a few other issues. So can I just mention that in relation with power outages, I was advised by the Energy Minister yesterday that out of the 180,000 people that were impacted during the event, on the 8th of March, Energex completed the network restoration, so that's really, really good news. And in relation to our community recovery grants, we've now made payments totaling $7.72 million. And of course, people can still contact that community recovery hotline if they need any further assistance, and that number is 1-800-173-149. We still have 6 schools, state schools, that are impacted, and I'm also advised that the insurance bill now for claims that have submitted totals more than $1 billion. Well, I'm very pleased to be here at Qualipack today with Troy and of course with the ministers, and there were estimated about $500,000 in damage here. Of course they do broccoli, pumpkin and onions, very important for all of us, but also to their pumpkins from memory, Troy, are exported overseas to Japan, so an exporter as well. In peak times, the staff numbers are here about 100 to 120. And of course they were impacted here with the water coming through, causing erosion, but also impacting on the tractor and some of the electrical equipment. And of course this is a snapshot of what's happened to our agricultural producers across that entire southeast up to the Fraser Coast. So the government's doing everything we can to support them. We already have 169 producers reported loss of fencing, 117 properties reported loss of equipment, 53% reported suffering a major or catastrophic impact. Producers are working with the Department of Agriculture. They are entitled to assistance, that's joint Commonwealth state, of grants up to $75,000 for primary producers, and low interest loans are also available. As of Tuesday, 344 applications for assistance have been received, 28 from primary producers, 316 from small businesses. The Brisbane Markets is up and running. We've engaged with AgForce, QFF, to examine impacts to their members. We've also engaged with GrowCon, Australian Berries, Australian Macadamias regarding impacts, with Lockyer Valley being the area of greatest concern. Areas around Gympie, Sunshine Coast and Southern Downs have also been significantly impacted. So here in the Lockyer Valley as well, we've had 1,343 applications for assistance. $233,000 has been paid out. 178 damage assessments have been completed in the Lockyer Valley. 169 houses and 9 commercial properties. 102 properties were flooded. 98 residential, 4 commercial, and 43 houses are considered to have moderate damage. So that's also good news. In Grantham, 32 houses have been assessed as having some flood impacts, 19 with moderate, 13 with minor. And we still have 7 people in the evacuation centre. We have 65 ADF in the area at the moment, which of course is also very much welcome news. This is a very big area. And later on we will be going out to the Community Recovery Centre and also to out to Grantham to look at, we were talking yesterday about ways in which councils and state can work together. After the 2011 floods, that new estate was developed, and the people who moved into that new estate, I'm advised that no one had any impacts from these floods in that have been moved there, had no impacts from these most recent floods. In relation to agriculture here in the Lockyer, it's valued at more than $398 million, 54 responses from the Lockyer Valley farmers on impacts, 8 have had catastrophic impacts, 22 major, 16 moderate, and 2 with minor livestock. So, and of course there's been impacts as well in this area in relation to local sporting community organisations as well. So look, with those few words, so I think Queenslanders can see that the impacts, this is a very big impact from these floods. This natural disaster is felt right across the entire southeast up to Fraser Coast, all the way down to the Gold Coast and the borders. And we will continue to work with people who've been impacted. And as you can see, we're getting out as fast as we can to all of these impacted areas. So I'll hand over to the Treasurer to say a few words. We've got Agriculture Minister and the Major General, and of course Troy. Thank you. Thanks, Treasurer.
Thanks, Premier. Good morning, everyone, including everyone watching live, including our Facebook friends. As our state fought against one of its biggest foes over the last 2 years, the pandemic, our agricultural producers, our farmers, Queenslanders on the land, really stood up for our state. They were the real heroes of our economic response to COVID-19. During those 2 years, they did not miss a beat. They kept producing value for our state, they kept producing products that we could use in our own state, but also primary products that could be exported to the world. And today we're here for them. They were there for us during the past 2 years, and now we are here for them. People like Troy and his company Qualipack. They export the world's best broccoli to places like Singapore, to Japan and to Taiwan. And now they've been knocked down by this flood, but they're not going to be knocked out. They're going to keep going. And speaking to Troy today, he's already got a plan with his family and his business to recover from this. And more than that, he's also reaching out to his friends, to his neighbours, to other producers in the region to see what he can do for them and what they can do together to recover from this flooding event. It's why our government's put together a $595 million package to support businesses like this, as well as other businesses, small businesses in particular, across the state, and householders. As at the close of business yesterday, we've paid out $7 million in hardship grants already to more than 41,000 Queenslanders and businesses. But this is not just about money. It's about providing the support that these primary producers and that other people need. And we know over the last 12 months our exports have continued to grow in Queensland. And I'm so proud of that as the Trade Minister, that notwithstanding the pandemic, that our agricultural and primary producers continue to export their goods to the world. That's increased significantly. The value of our rural exports in Queensland increased by $2 billion in the last 12 months. The total value of Queensland rural exports stood at $11.1 billion last year. They are businesses creating jobs, creating value, and producing the best for the world and exporting that to the world. And our value of rural exports is now up 8% over what it was pre-COVID. So as I say, this isn't really about numbers and it's not about dollars. It's about people. And today we're here to support people like Troy and his family, other primary producers across the region in the Lockyer who've really copped it. And some of these businesses have business interests across a number of properties, a number of farms across the region. And I know Troy felt the brunt of the storms in the southwest last year. In his property at Inglewood, they felt the brunt of flooding there as well. But they are fighting back, and we're here to support them and help them through this difficult time.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Well, good morning. It's great to be here with Troy Palaszczuk, the Premier and the Treasurer here at Qualipack in Lockyer Valley. We are backing our farmers, as we always do. The Palaszczuk government recognises the importance of agriculture, but in times like this recognises the good things that our farmers stand up for. Troy is a prime example of the resilience, but also the optimism of what our farmers in Queensland go through. And that's why the Palaszczuk government backs in farmers like Troy. As the Premier indicated, grants up to $75,000 to support in the recovery process. That is administrated by QRIDA, Queensland Rural Industry Development Authority. And just last night, we had about 120 growers in a hall just locally here, which I know Troy attended that meeting, and spoke to them about how you reach out and obtain those measures of assistance. It was well attended. It was backed up by the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries, but also QRIDA as well, to assist those farmers in having the understanding of accessing those grants and assistance. That's why we stand by our farmers. We support them through times, tough times, and make sure that we continue to see the growth like we see here in Qualipack here. Exporting to the world, kabocha pumpkin to Japan, broccoli to Singapore and other parts of Asia. It's a prime example of our future of agriculture in Queensland, and that's why, as the Premier indicated, a growth of more than $2 billion in this commodity. So we'll see more and more of that as we progress and move out of COVID as well. But we always need to remember, the tough times our farmers go through, because they are the salt of the earth. And that's why the government supports them, because we understand the importance not only of agriculture, but the importance of the good work they do. Thank you.
Troy?
Thank you, Premier, and to all the ministers and Major Elwood. Thank you for your support. It's been a tough couple of weeks, but as Minister Furness says, we'll get on with it and we clean up and we get going. But you know, we've had 3 big floods in 11 years, so I always say that we've had we're very well qualified in cleaning up. So we've done it before and we'll do it again. And like I said, the support that we get from the government, and I know the farmers last night at the meeting where, you know, it was well welcomed, and I'm sure they'll take it up, and you know, time will heal the problem they've got, and they'll be growing before you know it. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Major General.
Thanks very much, Premier. Look, the last couple of days, you know, it's again, you see some very sad and upsetting scenes. One of the common threads that has come through is the impact that the floods have had on children within affected properties. I think that feeling of a loss of sense of security. And so I do want to reiterate that it's important that people go onto the recovery hotline, community recovery hotline, to seek support where you need it. It's really important, particularly now. Interestingly as well, yesterday when we went out to Deagon, we went to a couple who had lived there for many, many years, and to show how different things are this time around, the homeowners showed us where the level of water came up in 1974, 2011, and with these floods, and those first two did not hit the house. This one did, and it had a significant impact. So I think it is important to understand that this was a very different event to what we have seen before. The community are working exceptionally hard, community leaders, and we went through houses that have been flooded, and you know, though the homeowners have worked themselves to the bone to get everything cleared out and to let everything dry, and it's again, it is really inspirational to see them come back and working so hard to move forward. Now, there's been 16,700 assessments done, and the QFAS has done amazing work in achieving that, which will then allow in prioritisation, which is really important. Around 4,000 of those properties are moderately to severely damaged, so it is significant, and but it is great work that's been done to really start to understand the scale of this disaster. I will now be taking time to travel further afield out of the Brisbane city area to understand the impacts in areas here and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you. We're happy to take some questions.
Premier, Lake Clarendon here sits at about 35%, and farmers are really worried about water security. Will the government support a pipeline from Ivanhoe to Lockyer Valley like it has with Toowoomba and Warwick?
Look, we're happy to have a look at that. Of course, we prioritised the pipeline from Toowoomba out to Warwick because if you remember, they faced that severe water shortage and water was being trucked in. I also understand that there's issues up at Mount Morgan, and be meeting with the Mayor later on today, so very happy to talk about those issues.
Will you be making a formal request to the Prime Minister to declare Queensland as a national flood emergency, and if so, which areas?
Yeah, look, thank you. That's a really good question. And can I just say that Queensland has very good disaster management arrangements in place. So unfortunately, we've seen a lot of natural disasters, so we actually respond very quickly. We've actually used our own state-specific disaster declarations, and they've provided us with all the necessary powers that we need, especially when it means like whether it's closing roads or closing schools or relocating people. So those declarations were made for Gympie on the 26th of February, Brisbane on the 27th of February, and Maryborough on the 27th of February. And I understand that they expire on Sunday. Now, in relation to the Australian Defence Force, we now have the Major General in place. And look, the Prime Minister's been very good there, where he has said that any assistance we need with the Defence Force we can utilise, and that's exactly what's being happened. So the time for that national emergency was probably a week ago. So we've actually gone past that. The floodwaters have gone down, they've subsided. And as I said, those disaster declarations will be lifted on Sunday.
What do you make of Scott Morrison going to flood-affected areas in New South Wales but not actually talking to locals?
Look, you'll have to put those questions to him. That is entirely a matter for his program. What I can say is that I've asked all of my team to be out and about. I know that even all of our local members, if they've had flood impacts, they're out there talking to people. I met with a number of them yesterday. There was Jimmy Sullivan, Leanne Linnard when we went out to Kedronbrook. I then saw Sterling out at Deagon with the Major General, and then I was up in Scarborough with Yvette, and of course meeting with people. And as the Major General said when we were out at Deagon, to see the impact on people's personal lives and possessions, and the fact that that water came up so quickly from the creek, really puts in perspective the hardship that people have gone through.
In 2019, the Commonwealth announced the Emergency Response Fund. Queensland only received funding for 3 out of the 20 projects that requested the flood mitigation. How disappointing is that? Should more have been allocated?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can't have a fund and not use it. So I honestly believe that if you've got the money there, let's get it out the door. And unfortunately, Queensland submitted 20 projects seeking $127 million. So when you think about it, $127 million out of $5 billion is not that much, and only 3 Queensland projects were approved. And look, one that we're really fighting for is the Bundaberg flood levy. We saw the impacts of the floods up there in Bundaberg. We've had our money on the table. That is absolutely a no-brainer. That should just happen. I mean, it needs to be built. It should have been built ages ago.
The Premier, South East Queensland is the biggest red meat processing region in Australia, with Tees and JBS and ACC Kilcoy Global all operating out of this region. What assistance are you giving to the industry to try and keep supermarket shelves stocked and be able to reinstate their export markets as soon as possible?
Yeah, I might get the Treasurer and the Agriculture Minister to make a few more comments about that, but we know how important it is to ensure that our food supplies get to where they need to go. And can I say they have done a remarkable job considering the impacts that the meat industry did have, especially during COVID. And I know that Minister Furner worked very closely with the industry, and now they've had the impact of the floods as well. We also know how important the export market is, and the income that has the exports for beef has been probably some of the best that people have seen in recent times. We also know the impact that the Townsville floods, if you remember, had the monsoonal event, when it went all the way out to Cloncurry there, had an issue on the impact of our cattle industry as well. But I might just get the Agriculture Minister to comment on that. Are there any other questions for me? Yeah.
The Prime Minister questioned why you hadn't funded those flood mitigation projects yourself as the state government. What's your response to that?
Since 2011, the joint between the state and federal government, and we've had, like I've said, we've gone through a lot of natural disasters, and we've actually worked cooperatively together. So the amount of money that has been spent on Queensland, joint, state and federal, since 2011 is $17 billion. That's a lot of money. Now there is a $5 billion fund there sitting there from the federal government, the money needs to get out the door. So, like I said before, we asked for 20 projects seeking $127 million, and only 3 Queensland projects were approved. And I've got the full list here, and you're more than happy to have a look at that full list.
Has the federal government provided any more detail on the submarine project, or have you asked for any more detail?
No more detail.
Why not?
But we have to ask them.
Would you support a nuclear base for subs at the Port of Brisbane though?
Well, we need to see some detail.
Did you have a
We support the defence. Let's say this. We absolutely support the defence industry in this state. I mean, the Treasurer might be able to have something more to say about it, because I know that he was instrumental too in helping us get the Rheinmetall contract here, which is just down the road at Ipswich, and that's supporting hundreds of jobs. We've always fought to have the naval fleet, when it was the Pacific patrol boats, when that contract was looking at going to Cairns, we fought for that, and then it went over to Perth. But I might get the Treasurer might have something more to say about defence.
Are there any questions for the Major General? All right, thanks, Major General.
thank you.
So much. You don't need to be here anymore. Look, Queensland stands at the front line of our nation's defence. We always have, through the First World War, the Second World War, through Vietnam, through other military conflicts, and also peacekeeping. And we also stand at the front line of our nation's defence industries. But the reality is, this is a promise about something that may happen in the future. It's an announcement about an announcement that might happen in 10 years' time. And Queenslanders would rightfully be sceptical about what Scott Morrison says may or may not happen in a decade's time. We know he doesn't hold a hose in a bushfire. He doesn't hold a shovel or a wheelbarrow in a flood. He doesn't hold a vaccination needle during a pandemic, and he doesn't hold the door open for a quarantine facility, which he didn't even build in Queensland, which has been the responsibility of the federal government for 120 years. So Queenslanders will rightfully be sceptical about this announcement, because we know that Scott Morrison is all about announcement and he's not about action. We've had a series of announcements recently from the Prime Minister about things that may happen decades in the future. We want to have a strong defence force in this country. We know the world is an unstable and dangerous place. Queensland has always done its bit, and we will do our bit in the future. But let's see the detail first before our government is asked about our position on what is fundamentally the responsibility of the federal government. The national government is responsible for national defence and has been for 120 years. So let's see the detail, and then we're happy to respond.
Premier, did you have a discussion with the Prime Minister on the phone this morning, and if so, what was said during that phone call?
No, we're catching up later on today.
Premier, SEP Water has admitted to 2 broken pumps near Lake Clarendon, which has resulted in around 1 billion amounts of water loss. What do you say to those farmers who are now going to miss out on that?
I'm happy to look at those details.
Could that be, I guess, avoided in future somehow?
I'll get the can I have a look at the specifics of that question? Yeah.
The audit office is seeking more information about the WellCamp quarantine costs. Do you welcome that?
They were entitled. The audit office does random checks and balances across government the whole time, so we have no problems with that.
So you're not worried about it at all?
No, not at all. Let me just say very clearly, the Queensland government stepped up and built a quarantine facility, and as the Treasurer said, and I've said it many times, quarantine has always been a federal responsibility. We have that facility now, and it is actually there for the future. It's for the future of this state, and it's there, and it is built, and it is complete.
Domestic violence rates are through the roof, and there appears to be another incident out at Logan overnight. How many more incidents need to happen until there's some actual legislative change?
Well, there's been, you're probably familiar with the Not Now, Not Ever report that Quentin Bryce handed down, and as I said the other day, we have implemented all of those recommendations. We've got former Judge Margaret McMurdo, who's heading up the Women's Justice Task Force. She's already handed down one report. There's another report to come. Our government will continue to always look at further reforms in relation to this area. What has happened overnight, reports I've heard there, is very distressing, and it is a very tragic situation. and I'm quite sure that the police will provide some further comment on that later on today.
Leading epidemiologists are expecting a spike in COVID cases due to the floods. Is this something the government's been preparing for?
As we know, the rates of COVID admissions in hospital is coming down. It is now under 300 and the number of people ventilated is coming down. That means we are coming off the wave. That does not mean that COVID is not out there and it's not having an impact on people. And some people are ending up in hospital and tragically some people are losing their lives. So can I just say to people out there, please, where you can, socially distance, and that includes our good friends of the media here today. You should be socially distancing where you can, and of course, if you are some of the more vulnerable members of our community, think about when you go into crowded spaces about putting that mask on. That is entirely now up to your discretion, but Queensland has done a fantastic job getting through this wave. It's been very tough on everyone. It's had an impact on businesses. It's had an impact on families. And now we get on with what we have termed our new normal. And that is to go about and live our lives as best as possible, but still encouraging people. If you have not had that booster, please get that booster. It's that added layer of protection.
So, just on COVID, so Townsville Hospital has just had its 4th code yellow this year, even with COVID cases now dropping significantly. If our hospitals continue to cope with demand post-COVID, what will the state government do to increase capacity? My understanding is that code has now passed. Also, too, Townsville experienced the peak in their COVID numbers later than the Gold Coast and Brisbane, and that's great to see that they're coming off that wave.
Epidemiologists are attributing the spike to their expected spike to a number of people being displaced and staying with others, as well as testing not being a priority. What can be done to combat that?
The testing is still available out there. We have a range of people should, if they still have any symptoms, there's availability of RAT tests now in supermarkets, in chemist shops. People should still, if they have any symptoms, go and get a test and follow the isolation rules. And I know a lot of people are doing that. One of the families we visited yesterday had just been isolating from COVID as well. So people have had a double impact of COVID and now these floods. And fingers crossed, can we just have a really good 2022?
Thanks, guys. We might just give a quick update on what they're doing in the region.
Yeah, thank you.
And I want to thank the Queensland Government for the ongoing support that allows us to play this really vital role. We're currently working with local councils and charities to identify the exact needs for people that have been impacted. I want to thank Queenslanders for their incredible generosity. We've already received over $1 million worth of donations, and thousands of goods and services have been pledged online through the Give It website, removing the need for local charities to have to sort, store and dispose of unwanted, well-meaning donations. This is a huge event, and we know recovery will be long, and Give It will match your offer to genuine need when and if it is needed. Currently there are almost 9,000 requests for assistance right across Queensland on the Give It website. You can donate the physical item, or you can donate money, and 100% of money received by Give It will be used to purchase those essential items. We are in Gatton today with the Premier to provide much needed assistance for impacted people throughout the Lockyer region. And as always, Give It is committed to buying locally wherever possible to make sure that businesses are aided in this recovery as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Can I just ask a quick question of the Ag Minister?
Yeah, sure.
Last one.
Lucky last one.
We already know that costs at the supermarket are going to go up because of the lack of international workers. Are these floods going to worsen that?
One of the things I can say about international workers and labour for primary producers, Queensland has led the nation in terms of supply of local workers, on whether it be on the farms, whether it be other locations, meat processing plants. That's one thing we're proud of, and we'll continue working with the federal government, make sure whether it be through their new ag visas, when that happens, we'll work with them in making sure we have the distribution of labour across Queensland. We also work with our state and territory counterparts as well to make sure there's supply. So we'll continue working through those processes. It is a difficult outcome, I must say that. We approached the federal government at the time when COVID first hit us back in 2020 to try and encourage them to look at initiatives to retain many of the international, whether it be the tourists, whether it be the backpackers, the students. That fell on deaf ears, unfortunately.
Do you expect the cost of produce to go up further at the supermarkets?
That's a natural process you see in any disaster or any issue. It's market driven, so we have no control as a government in terms of the markets. What we do have control over is make sure the assistance we provide our primary producers, like in this case, through this natural disaster, of providing up to $75,000 in grant funding. We'll always be there for our farmers in Queensland. That's one thing we're proud of. Thank you.
Minister, I'd just like to repose my former question. With the red meat industry being cut off at so many supply chains by the recent flood events, what's your government doing to ensure that supermarkets' shelves stay stocked and that export market can be reinstated as soon as possible?
Last week we engaged with all our major stakeholders, AgForce, Queensland Farmers Federation, Berries Australia, Macadamias Australia, but also GrowCom. And at the end of the week, we held a joint teleconference with under the auspices of Agriculture Coordination Group teleconferences. So we engaged with those stakeholders in the red meat processing plants. Just yesterday, I was up at Gympie at Nolan's. They're processing from the beginning of the week. 400 head yesterday processed as a result of them fast tracking, getting in there, cleaning up. Same optimism that Troy Palaszczuk here has on Lockyer Valley. Having that belief of getting things moving, getting things happening, getting that red meat out on the shelves. That's what you see from people that are attuned with what the needs are of the supply chain and making sure that food gets onto the shelves right throughout our state.
Okay, so what's your government doing in regards to helping farmers deal with horrendously high input costs at the moment, fuel prices just being the most recent sting in that tail?
Well, I think that's a question that should be directed to the federal government in terms of fuel prices and those sorts of things. But once again, we'll support our farmers at times and needs, like we're doing in this particular disaster.
Are you concerned that less crops are going to be going into the ground this year with such high fuel, fert and seed costs?
We're seeing actually more crops going in the ground, and like it being a situation of what time of the season, what sort of crop. Farmers make that decision based on what is best suited for their land and what is best suited for the market.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's a lot of